people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with the controversial Sandy Ryan versus Jessica McCaskill fight. That controversial outcome, let me start off by saying, in the 10th and final round, I had it about 8 rounds to 2 in favor of Sandy Ryan. It really wasn't a hard fight to score.
It's nothing against Jessica, but that's how I had it scored.
The idea that one of the judges found seven rounds to give to Jessica McCaskill,
I don't get it.
I don't understand it. The most that I could give Jessica McCaskill were 2, maybe 3 rounds. Three, if you're being generous. Sandy Ryan,
She was better in every department.
better on the outside, better on the inside, slipping, rolling, bobbing, weaving, under punches. She made Jessica miss a lot of punches.
It's not like she spent the whole night on her bike.
She didn't. She was in and out, on her toes, putting shots together, making Jessica miss, making Jessica pay. That's not saying Jessica didn't have a few successful bursts of aggression, few hard shots, but Sandy Ryan seemed the clear winner to me.
Easy.
Noticeable boos in the crowd as the judges' scorecards were being read. The reaction online from not just the fans, but the pros themselves.
During the broadcast, you heard Sonny Edwards, IBF flyweight champion, call it outright. Call it a robbery.
Sonny Edwards thought it was a robbery. Barry Jones online, he called it a robbery. Amanda Serrano had the fight scored. She had it the same way I had it. 8 rounds to 2 in favor of Sandy Ryan.
It's nothing against Jessica. I got nothing against Jessica.
Or Rick Ramos, her longtime manager and trainer. But the way I had the fight scored, Sandy Ryan was the clear winner, making this outcome inexplicable.
I don't know what to say, but I feel like I need to come on here and do a video. The biggest fight of my life, and I nearly changed my life tonight, but we can get the rematch. Hopefully Jess's team have agreed, Eddie's up for it, everyone wants to see the rematch, and I want the rematch, so we need to settle it. And I don't know, but all I want to say is thank you for all the support, and also the American fans out here in the crowd. You amazing. Like,
It was Mark Streisand that gave Jessica McCaskill a 97-93 score. He found 7 rounds to give her, which most can't wrap their minds around. Even more perplexing is that all 3 judges scored the 9th round for Jessica McCaskill, which was a particularly dominant round for Sandy Ryan. She was really letting Jessica have it in the 9th round, yet all 3 judges scored that round for Jessica.
Doesn't make sense.
Veteran fighter Ronika Jeffrey found herself asking, on what basis are these fights scored? I mean, what is the scoring criteria? Because this seemed a relatively easy fight to score.
Sandy was better on the outside. She was outboxing Jessica on the outside and out-dogging her on the inside.
The problem with this is it creates doubt in what should have been the winning strategy and what's widely being accepted as the winning strategy to the judges.
It's not good enough.
So when you go back and you're preparing for the second fight, what exactly do you improve upon when by all rights you should have won the first one? There shouldn't be a rematch.
It's not a knock on Jessica, but I had it 8-2, Sandy Ryan.
Not saying Jessica wasn't putting up a fight. She put up a good fight, threw a lot of punches, but she missed a lot of punches. A lot of her punches, they got blocked.
Counter.
This is not the kind of fight, at least not aesthetically, not based on how it looked, to where you're supposed to get your glasses out and split hairs over it. Seemed a clear Sandy Ryan win, so
Another controversial outcome.
I just don't see how anyone could have found 7 rounds to give Jessica. I could only find 2, maybe 3.
This was supposed supposed to be the first fight of Jessica McCaskill's newly inked multi-fight deal.
Imagine it's a 2-fight, maybe a 3-fight deal, and I imagine that the second fight of this deal, it's going to be a Sandy Ryan rematch.
But if you're Sandy and you feel that you did everything right, what exactly do you improve upon?
What do you fix? That's the hindrance. It creates doubt.
Plants that seed.
I felt like Sandy Ryan was balanced. I felt she showed the right amount of offense and defense. I felt she did everything right.
Judges may have inadvertently made Jessica McCaskill the villain, giving her a victory the boxing community at large don't feel she deserved.
Just in keeping with the theme of villains, those perceived as being villains in the sport of boxing, Conor Benn finally returned to action after 18 months of inactivity in a fight that I think he acquitted himself well in.
Though most of the focus is still on his anti-doping fiasco, I'll be honest with you, I don't care that much.
And if you're sitting around taking in Canelo Alvarez fights or Tyson Fury fights, then you don't either.
But he didn't clear his name.
Who has in this situation? What fighter that tested positive for a banned substance ever proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were innocent?
Enough with the pearl clutching already.
You don't really care that he tested positive for a banned substance. You've just got a hard-on for Eddie Hearn and his fighters. That's what all the focus, that's what all the attention.
That's what it's about.
Conor Benn, after 18 months of inactivity, acquitted himself well against Mexico's own Rodolfo Orozco, a very statuesque, albeit unheralded fighter who showed a lot of toughness because he got hit with some bombs. He got hit with some hard shots.
Big punches.
What Conor's performance effectively communicated to me is that he hasn't spent the time off, the 18 months of inactivity, sitting around feeling sorry for himself. He actually looked really sharp out there.
He didn't miss a beat.
Against a very stubborn opponent who was attempting to walk him down and crowd him in the pocket.
Good chin.
Even though Conor didn't finish the fight with a highlight reel knockout of Rodolfo Orozco, the fight was a thoroughly entertaining fight round by round, within the round. No lulls in the action. Rodolfo was making an earnest effort to take it to Conor Benn, but Conor was too slick and too smooth. Those level changes.
Slipping, rolling, riding, punches, bobbing and weaving, countering. Conor showed a little bit of everything.
Good feet, too. Taking breaks from the action, circling away from Rodolfo, then fighting his way off of those ropes.
Good stuff.
Now, Conor's critics and those most vexed that he's returned to the sport of boxing may highlight that Conor's fight with Rodolfo didn't end in a highlight reel knockout like the Chris Van Heerden fight or the Chris Algieri fight.
18 months of inactivity might have something to do with that, though.
Though what his critics may immediately allude to is now that he's tested positive for a banned substance and he's under scrutiny, he had to get tested by VADA and produce a negative test in order to be cleared to fight.
They'll say now that he's not on the juice, he's not knocking people out.
And I'll say once again, I don't actually care that much. When Conor Benn tested positive for that banned substance, Chris Eubank Jr. was going to fight him anyway. Had the fight not been called off,
Chris was going to fight him. Chris didn't care.
Chris was the one fighting. So if the guy fighting doesn't care, then why should I?
It's his head getting punched. He's the one in danger.
Chris Eubank Jr., who reacted to Conor Benn's comeback, his performance, with a yawning emoji.
This fight with Rodolfo Orozco was fought at junior middleweight. The fight with Chris, I think, will be at middleweight. No catch weight.
A full 160. No catch weight, no rehydration clause. None of that stuff from the first set of negotiations, from the first fight.
That didn't happen.
Controversy itself, for me and my money, only makes that fight with Chris Eubank Jr. that much bigger, gets that much more attention.
It's bigger now than it was last year.
I think I saw something about Eddie Hearn saying that he means to do that fight, reschedule it for December of this year. December 23rd?
We'll see.
If he does. Do you think any of these people clutching at their pearls will boycott the fight, will boycott Conor Benn, or will they watch the fight the same way they watch any other fight involving any other fighter who ever tested positive for a banned substance? The truth is, for all the complaining you've been seeing, these people don't care that much. They just pretend to.
And I, unlike them, don't feel the need to lie about it.
If Chris Eubank Jr., who's supposed to be fighting this guy, if he don't care that much, I'm not going to pretend that I do.
For what?
Sit back and enjoy the show.
Quit your crying.
Then come to the main event of that same card, the Hitchins versus Jose Zepeda super lightweight contest. It's not a fight where Richards and Hitchins did anything wrong per se, to where you can over-critique it and over-analyze it. Put simply, this is how cerebral fighters fight.
Too much length, too much speed.
The belly aching in association with the fight has more to do with perhaps the entertainment value, how entertaining the fight was.
Or wasn't.
I don't think it helped that the two fights before it were both action fights featuring action fighters. The Sandy Ryan versus Jessica McCaskill fight, the Conor Benn versus Rodolfo Orozco fight to cap off the night.
With Hitchins versus Zepeda.
I figured that Richards and Hitchins would be too tall, too long, too fast, and too sharp for a more weathered Jose Zepeda, who's been around the block with some tough fighters. He's been in some tough fights.
He's gonna be slower than Richard.
And his approach is a lot more simple than what you get from a more cerebral boxer, a pure boxer like a Hitchins, who's got a lot of height and a lot of length for a 140-pound fighter, a lot of speed.
For boxers like Richard, it's all about controlling the action when where the action happens and managing the distance. That's what he did, and he did it effectively.
If you're judging Richardson Hitchins' performance on that predication, then he did good. He acquitted himself well, and he was able to effectively control one of the more dangerous punchers at this weight with relative ease.
Not dissimilar from what we saw downstairs at 135 with Shakur S. Stevenson and Nikitila.
You know, after that fight, much like after this one, you saw people belly aching that the fight wasn't exciting, that they were fighting Sleep harder than Shakur was fighting Nikitila, harder than Richardson Hitchins was fighting Jose Zepeda. You saw a lot of that.
I get it.
And everyone is entitled to their opinion. Though if I am to judge Richardson Hitchins' performance on the predication of effectiveness, how good and effective did he look? He looked quite all right. And he still presents one of the more challenging base styles coupled with his youth, his length, and his speed.
I don't think a lot of people are going to be in a hurry to deal with a fighter like this. Not dissimilar from what we see with Shakur Stevenson at 135. There are not a lot of fighters in a hurry to fight him.
We judge the performance based on the effectiveness of Richardson Hitchins' boxing. He did a good job, but as far as entertainment value, it's the bane of the pure boxer. Slowing the tempo of a fight down, pot-shotting from the outside, managing the distance.
Being cautious.
Doesn't go over well with everyone. I still think that he gave a good account of himself, acquitted himself well against a dangerous puncher, a southpaw at 140 pounds.
Maybe he should take a page out of Shakur Stevenson's playbook. After the Nikitila fight, it seems like he didn't like the criticism that he was receiving, so he did more to show action.
Seems like he did more to show more of a work rate, show more action within a round.
Something for Richardson Hitchins to work on, but he did all right.
Beat Jose Zepeda with ease and added to his unblemished record. Congratulations to him. And finally, earlier yesterday, the highlight reel knockout in what was the rematch between Joyce and Zhang. Zhang, who dispatched Joe in half the time it took him the first time out. Where the first time out, he got him out of there in 6 rounds. This time, it only took 3 in a short right hook off a backhand.
We knew you could hurt him. We knew he had the power to do it.
In the first fight, landing several backhands, several straight left hands from out of the southpaw stance, counter left hands. This time, he added to that. Joe started off the fight cautious and careful, fencing with Zhang in the first round.
Could see he didn't want to charge at him like he did in the first fight.
Fencing behind the jab, using a shell guard, attempting to roll punches off the shoulder unsuccessfully, as Zhang was able to land 3 or 4 backhands, 3 or 4 left hands in the first round.
Even though Joe was circling him and trying to take his time, be patient, it didn't work.
Still getting hit with those backhands in the first round, and Zhang builded off of that success in the second, putting punches together and laying into Joyce. That sense of urgency that Zhang and his team talked about. They knew they couldn't trust the judges.
They weren't going to leave it in their hands, building off of his success in the second round and closing the show in the third.
It was a straight left hand followed by a short right hook.
That's all it took.
And that rhymes. Zhang knew, you can't let this go to the judges' scorecards. There's nothing Frank Warren would love more to get Joyce back in the winner's bracket and get him that WBO interim title.
Now what Frank is saying is that Joe might need to consider retirement.
In a more somber tone, he said he seriously needs to consider retirement. It's not going to be an easy journey back.
It's not.
It's the height, the length, the power, and the angle of attack that disassembled Joe Joyce.
That's what it is. Zhang is all wrong for him.
Fighters lose and come back, Warren said. I've seen that on many occasions. He's 38, but he's not got a lot of miles on the clock as far as being a pro boxer is concerned. It was his 16th or 17th fight. We'll see. It's up to him. He seriously needs to consider it, retirement, because it's not going to be an easy journey back. There are some good fights out there, but none of those fights are easy.
Maybe he could do a rematch with Daniel Dubois.
Huey Fury, upon his return, Dillian White.
If he ever clears his name, if he's ever allowed to box again.
No, I don't think it's over. It's only over if Joe Joyce wants it to be over. Even if he's not in the world title picture, there are still other lucrative fights that you could put him in. Lest we forget, Derek Chisora's been around for years. Losses in the double digits, but memorable performances, win or lose. And it's for that reason that I think if
he wants to keep fighting, he can keep fighting.
He was doing all right up to the first 2 rounds, Warren said. He was negating the southpaw style of Zhang, but unfortunately, he had a lapse of concentration and things moved the other way. He had a little bit of an exchange and got caught with a world-class punch. It was a world-class knockout.
So now he's got 2 losses on his record, but they're both to the same guy. And not everyone brings to the table what Zhang brings to the table. He's just as big as Joe, stronger.
With more hand speed and more of a boxing brain. Tack on power. It's all wrong for Joe. Zhilei Zhang is all wrong for Joe Joyce. The silver lining is not everybody's Zhilei Zhang.
Ahead of the fight, I had my doubts. I did see an avenue of opportunity for Joe Joyce to win, but that was provided that he took the first few rounds off, that he let Zhilei Zhang do all the work in those rounds and survive them.
Let Zhang punch himself out so that Joe Joyce's world-class cardio could take over. That was his best shot, but I wasn't convinced that it would work. I wasn't convinced that he could take Zhang's power for the first half of the fight, and I was right to assume Zhang would win.
He did.
And the prediction stuck. Now, Joe Joyce has insisted that he will not retire following his knockout rematch defeat to Zhilei Zhang. This is not it for me. I've got plenty more in the tank. I'm just gonna have to take a bit of time off and come back new and improved.
At 38?
Listen,
Look,
I'm no wide-eyed optimist, but I'm no slave to the moment either. There are other winnable fights out there for Joe Joyce. As far as just making a living, fighting, making a living as a boxer, he can keep doing that because there are a lot of guys out there, they can't stand up to what Joe brings to the table the same way that Zhang did.
he's got 2 losses, but they're both to the same guy.
If Frank Warren thinks it's the end of the road for Joe, and he has no more use for him, Joe can always migrate over to Boxer. I'm sure they'd be happy to have him. He can migrate over to Matchroom as well. They have a good number of heavyweights.
Good number of fights they could put him in. No, they're not title fights, but would allow him to get back out there, rebound, and keep making money.
Fights with guys like unbeaten Justice Huni of Australia, Australia's own Dempsey McKean. He's coming off that loss to Filip Pergovic. He was doing all right till he got knocked out.
They've got some fights they can put him in.
On the premise that perhaps his contract is up with Queensbury, and Queensbury no longer has anything for Joe to do, he can always migrate over to Matchroom. He can always migrate over to Boxer. They need the boxers. They need the content.
Just wasn't looking good for Joe.
Guy who's been the guy that he's been, a guy who's a offensive whirlwind, but he's got defensive deficiencies. He doesn't move his head, doesn't protect himself well enough to neutralize the other guy's power. He's not all of a sudden going to become that at 38 or 39 years old. So I figured it's not going to work out this weekend.
But it doesn't have to be the end of the road for Joe either.
Joe decided to come in 25 pounds heavier for this fight than he did the first one, and I felt it wouldn't make a difference. It didn't.
But you know, maybe with somebody else.
Somebody who's not eye level to Joe, and somebody who's not a southpaw.
Can rebound.
Congratulations to Big Bang Zhang!